Hello and welcome back to Behind the Brief, the podcast where we go beyond the buzzwords and into the real stories behind marketing and leadership. Today's guest is someone who's redefining what it means to be a product marketer in the age of data. We have Tanwistha, recognized among the top 100 PMM influencers of 2024 and nominated as the PMM Rising Star by Product Marketing Alliance. She spent over 13 years helping B2B tech companies bridge the gap between storytelling and strategy, from building data-first narratives to driving GTM campaigns that actually convert. If you have ever struggled to make complex platforms sound simple or to get marketing, sales, and product speaking the same language, this one's for you. Thank you so much, Tanwistha, for joining the show today.
Thank you, Shruti, for having me in the show. And that was a great intro for sure, I'll tell you. It's been a long time that I've heard so many adjectives before my name, but then happy to be part of the show. I've watched a few of your videos actually, and of which definitely I have a few favorites. And it feels good to be part of your show and continuing our chat that we already had in the last week, today, and any other discussion that we would want to do in the future. Then happy to get started and looking forward to the entire session.
Thank you so much. And yes, we had our own PMM run sessions just right before this conversation. But right now it's time to dig into your product marketing experiences, some stories that you would want to share with us today. I'm really excited to get started and ask those questions. Okay, Tanvi, so you have worked across product, content, GTM, and now customer data platforms, which means you have literally seen the shift from content first to data first marketing. So how has that changed the way you think about product marketing?
Yeah, so now when I sit back and think of my early days, right? When I was working more on the product adoption content, I realized that at that point of time, I was unknowingly building a content treasure and practicing product marketing in the PLG motion long before we gave a name to it, right? And when I think through it, I kind of feel that I did not really shift from content to data. I simply realized that every positioning exercise that I was doing, any decision that I was taking, made me feel that it should always start with keeping the customer at the epicenter, right?
Right.
And especially because I started in the PLG motion, this shift meant that I would be focusing less on what I want my users to read and more on probably what helped them to find the value that we are delivering faster. How many clicks it takes for them to go through that answer that they're actually looking for, right? So it meant redesigning the entire experience that could remove all the friction, which of course connects to the very popularly known PLG motions, that is like building intuitive onboarding flows, creating your intent-based help content, not random help content. You actually go back and research the intent, the need that the customer is having, and then build that kind of content in product messages, right? Not just intuitive user experience, but in product message is also part of that experience, which is sometimes overlooked, right? And all these things were working. All these things that I was creating over the initial few years was actually working. And how do I know it was working is because the support tickets were coming down. Okay. And users were finding their way through the product with lesser and lesser handholding. So which was a positive sign, right? But then what happened is, even with these kind of signs that we were getting and were showing us that there is some kind of success, certain things were missing. I was always short staffed. We didn't have enough budget. We didn't have enough time, bandwidth. So a lot of the time what happened is like, I didn't know if the options that I was driving was actually translating a business outcome because I didn't get enough time to go back and check those data, right? So what happened is, I kind of changed when this entire thing kind of changed when I started asking few of these questions, and not just me asking these questions, rather me working with some of the VP of product, someone else more senior, some of my mentors outside of work, and we realized that what are the users actually doing after discovering these values, the values that we are giving them with this content, right? For example, you have defined a very good onboarding flow. After onboarding, which are those tasks that the user is performing? Is their getting started steps the same as me and my team, my product team has anticipated? Is that the same? Other questions were like, what kind of content formats were more correlating to the users that were driving their faster conversions, right? And which were keeping them retained to that particular screen or that particular feature? What were there any such product areas where there was less momentum? Again, I mean, like, but we were over investing in some of these good experiences, in some of the features which we were thinking that are probably driving good results, but we realized that that is actually not the feature that my user is using more. So that's when I mean, like these all questions got me into thinking that I should stop being experience first, and it's always important to have your data backed up, right? So, and but that doesn't mean that I'm telling you that you should abandon creativity. No, that should always be there. But whatever you're creating, right, and the content deliverables, any kind that you're creating, should be backed with data. And I mean that's about it for this. But then this also changed my approach towards product marketing, and I would want to talk about it a little bit on this line itself. So I realized that data and storytelling aren't really opposites, right? They come in sequence. Your data is giving you the clarity, yes, but without story, how will you keep the momentum going? Correct. So this is something that I've heard from almost all of my mentors and some of the senior PMM leaders mentioning time and again that as an impactful marketer, you cannot just tell good stories. You have to ensure that you are telling the right story backed up with good data that gives you some fact about the market, something about the product, something about the buyer. That's what will build an added credibility for your story, right? So these are things that I probably keep in mind when I'm defining a messaging or a narrative, moving from my initial days of product adoption content to more data driven product marketing and different kinds of content, right? I mean, as we see. So I mean, more or less these are the things that I would say about this.
Yeah, that's super important. And I think as a product marketer, having a lot of visibility on what data is driving, maybe the win-loss analysis, the sales enablement side of things, or even like how many conversions are there through the landing pages that you're handling or the ad campaigns that you're running. So I think those data patterns are something that really give you a way to how you improve or re-strategize your strategy, or what you need to keep compounding, like what's working you need to like scale on
Right.
that and then reshift your focus towards other things that are not working. I'd have a follow up on that. Like, do you think PMMs need to be data fluent, or is it more about knowing how to turn data into stories? Like you mentioned, storytelling and data go hand in hand, but I still think that there's still some gap around it. Like, people romanticize storytelling a lot more than data, but I think, like, how do PMM do that?
Right, absolutely. So they need to be data fluent for sure, but when I mean what I mean by being data fluent is not in the technical sense, right? I'm definitely not wanting them to be a data scientist, right? They need to know how to extract that kind of data points which would help them build a better story with better credibility, aligning to the previous context that I just gave you, right? So I'll take a few examples, right? So what you could do, like what PMMs could actually do when they are trying to analyze if they are thinking of the data driven narrative or not, right? Start by asking some smart questions, which I see. I mean, do not just go back to the same question of not why did the campaign work or not? But go and check that which segment, which is that storyline, which is that channel combination that got you more MQLs, right? How fast did those get converted or they kept moving, right? What some of the patterns to find out which of the narrative, which of the messaging, which of the narrative, which of the creative that you ran through your multiple campaigns worked better. Which of those narratives that your sales team is taking in their calls is closing the deals faster. We can discuss more about this particular point in a few of the later questions. But the one thing that I've kind of seen is like imagine you are building a new narrative for your product, right? And you're still not very confident if this narrative is going to help your sales team sell better or not.
Exactly.
Do not let the entire team keep using the new narrative. Do an A/B testing. Let them use the older narrative that was already working well with some tweaks of what the new narrative is. With playing around with these change in the narratives, right? Not entirely changing it. You can play around. I mean, because you know the industry that your prospect is coming from. Redesign the narrative around it and try to put in this newer narrative to see if it is working. You will definitely get some very live results on how your narrative is going to work or not. And that's the data that I'm talking about, right? So then there are other things like I would say your product, like for example, my product, the products that I've worked into cater to more than one vertical. And the story that there's one common narrative, but according to each of the verticals, of course, we will have to build a story specific to that vertical, backed with credibility from some of the existing logos that we have, right? That's very common that everyone practices, right? But the deal velocity per industry will definitely differ. A deal that moves faster in a retail, though you're working with enterprise clients, would be a little faster compared to a BFSI. Not just the velocity, but also once it is probably converted, right? The adoption depth of your current customers also give you a trend. Like you kind of, so how I see it, like your current customers, their use cases, the value that you're driving and giving out to them are again going to act as data points for you to build credibility for other prospects. That's something that we all follow, right? And which is why we have case studies and testimonials, right? But adoption is also something that is very important. Like imagine your length and breadth of use cases that your product can provide to your customers. Not all your current customers might be using it to the entire extent that your product offers. So in that case, understanding that which is that particular vertical where you have more adoption for a particular feature compared to the other vertical is another data point that you can gather. So these are things that I keep telling that, and this will never happen if the product marketing team or the product marketer works in silo. They have to be that engaging element in that entire organization, connecting to engineering, product, not really engineering to that extent, but then if it is a tech product, you absolutely have to be involved. Product, the customer success team. So these are those internal data points that will help you think and make your narrative more data driven. So that brings me to a framework that I keep noting down and telling any of the PMM that I talk to about is data, insight, story, action. So data is like what's actually happening. Insight is like what does that, whatever is happening, right? What insight do you get out of it? What behavior or pattern are you actually able to find out of it? What's emerging there? A story would be like connecting that to a narrative. It can be a live example or use case from your customer, a particular vertical. If you do not have the same use case running for another parallel industry, build something using that trend or that as an example, and then action to test it, as I told you, right? One of it is in the sales decks. It could be other things in terms of campaigns, right? And SDR narrative. So like these are the ways that I say, like find out the data, extract a insight that you get out of it, build a story, and then you can test it, like the action part of it. So that helps.
I love talking about frameworks. I do that all the time. And it eases out the entire mountain of a task that you're handling into very quick, actionable, step by step approach. So I hope people listening here can use this framework if they are not already doing that when they're stuck with such data and storytelling tasks. Shifting gears a little bit. So you wrote something that really hit home for a lot of marketers and me as well. Your pipeline looks full, but deals don't close, right? So why does that disconnect happen so often, and where does PMM fit into fixing it?
Yeah, I'm glad that you're bringing up this question because this is something that I've seen firsthand, and I have been, as you rightly said, I've been speaking about it a lot on LinkedIn for the last few months actually. So what happens is like we are often overexcited seeing the volume, right? And we start celebrating a lot earlier. But when we go back and we actually interrogate the real scenario, right, we figure out that the quality is weak. So I'll give you, like, when I was discussing this in one of my other PMM communities, that's when this entire term came up, right? The hidden revenue leak. And that's how we came up with this term because almost everyone has been facing. I mean, again, we are famous about bringing up those unpredictable and uncomfortable questions, but this is the reality as PMMs that we see it is. Because at the end, lesser conversion means definitely the PMM will be pulled into the discussion of why is it not converting, right? And why should you be the person at the end of the entire scenario answer it, wherein you can actually sit back in the organization and interrogate the situation. And what I'm going to tell you right now is something that we have actually seen firsthand, and we have started solving it and kind of found out a solution out of it, right? So I'll tell you what we have seen. We mostly saw that our dashboards were healthy, SDRs were hitting their quota, meetings were also being booked, but the point was like when we checked the closed and win numbers, that was something that was not really adding up to. So that's when we realized that everything is looking good on the papers, but in reality it's not the case, right? Right. So the deals that should have been closed were not closing. So was, what the context, what the prospect was actually looking out for in terms of a solution in our product wasn't properly gathered when the SDRs were doing their research or the discovery call. SDRs are not really part of discovery calls. They just get few minutes to talk to the prospects either through cold calls or email interactions, but then they were not investigating enough during that particular phase, right? And what the next step that led to it was a major part of the pre-sales time was also going into some of these calls which were not truly qualified enough to be called as a lead. So they were getting into calls, they were going there prepared in their usual way, but after going there, they were realizing that, okay, these all questions should have been answered, or should have been the answers to these questions should have been found out in the discovery phase before the pre sales came in. So basically, there was a flaw in the SDR connect. There was also a bit of reluctance from the AEs who were engaging in the first calls during the demo, right? So there are a lot of these questions that you need to ask. What's your tech stack? What is the immediate pain points? What other alternatives are you using, right? So I'm just giving you some very simple answers, but then there are more detail to it. So when what we realized is the immediate thing that had to be fixed was we needed to build a pre-qualified checklist that would be used in the different stages. So I worked with the SDRs, with the AEs to figure out that particular pre-qualifying checklist that could be used by the SDR starting from the then to the AE level, so that by the time the pre-sales team comes in for the demo and the context setting call, the solution level context setting call, there's a lot more clarity into understanding, okay, this is the right ICP. The use cases they're looking for are also the primary use cases that we solve for. So it's good enough for us to invest our time and effort into closing this, taking it ahead, right? So that was definitely an important step we took. And why this stage was important? Because before this we saw that there was no structured preparation until then, because you did not have a framework or a checklist, as I said. Without, see, again, people might say that processes make your, processes are fine, but in a startup they really do not make sense. But I kind of do not agree to it. Unless you have a process in place, it might be as simple as possible. You do not have to follow something that is standard. You can customize it as per your team's need, but put a process in place. People are then accountable, right? People are then accountable, right? So then what we did is, another thing that was happening for us was there were too many pipeline definition, too many pipeline stages. I'll just give you a quick example, definition of what all stages we had and what all changes we did, right? So there was it started with my sales qualified lead, which is owned by my SDR. So this is about the active conversations where the interest is. These are the ideal stages, ideal definition for the three stages. It was not the ideal scenario in our case, but I'll just tell you. So sales qualified lead is which is the stage is owned by your SDR. You have active conversations where the SDR is supposed to validate the interest to find out if the ICP fit is a yes or a no. It makes sense only to move to the next stage, which is the discovery call, right? Then comes your discovery call, which we named as sales accepted lead, which is when your AE or your sales team comes in. For us, it was sales because it's a smaller team for us, but it's AE or sales. You can kind of think of it that way. So this is the stage wherein you have done your discovery context, how your pre-qualified checklist, if in place, should be a driving factor in this particular stage as well. And you have got a fairly clear understanding of the business outcome that my client is looking to achieve, the primary use cases that they want to evaluate using us. And by then, you would know if it is a yes or a no, ideally. Then for us, the third stage was sales accepted opportunity. This is where a debate would happen between my AEs or the sales on the pre-sales team, right? If all the checklists from the step 1 and step 2 are followed, in this stage, it should be a confirmed yes. You should not be debating, because this is the stage where in the pre-sales is actually going into the demo, right? And the detailed demos. So you cannot have a question mark in this stage. So the next step towards closure is actually supposed to define in this particular stage.
Yeah.
But as I said, all of these is the ideal scenario. This was not what was happening. right? So what happened for us was the sales accepted lead. The stage in the second stage was kind of acting as a holding off stage where there was no ownership. None of the teams were actually looking up to take the ownership, like telling that, okay, these are the things that have happened in the past. These should be the next because I have the right answer. Because the checklist was not being followed, right? So we realized that no, this cannot happen. So first change that we did was we brought in that checklist that I told you for the proper IC qualification based on all the criteria that we are setting. Then was ensuring that this particular stage of SL we don't need it, because we do not need a stage where people are not ready to take your ownership, right? So that is a change that we did. And by the time we did this, the other things that me as a PMM started influencing in this entire stage was, and this is something that a lot of other PMMs or aspiring PMMs often trying to get into roles, because a portion of PMM also coincides with growth marketing, right, or performance marketing. So which is where this question gets asked, that how can a PM influence such kind of a situation? My answer to it is, see, I am not the one who is directly seeing the pipelines. I may not be involved in checking the dashboard and movement of the pipelines every single day, but I'm the one who built the checklist, talking to the teams. I am the one who has helped the team clean up the ICP, to build a persona deck. What to be spoken to based on what kind of persona you're talking to, right? And even for the SDRs to outreach, the entire strategy for messaging, whether it is email to be sent out or when they're talking, right? The objection handling points. So that is where I am part of. And all the past wins and loss, that data is also something that definitely comes into my asset creation. So that's about it. That how we solve this problem. I mean, it's just been recent that we have solved it. It's so far working well, but I'm just hoping that the process stays in place and brings us some great results.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. There's an ideal scenario and then there's a reality that is way different than what you want to achieve ultimately. Even the processes that you want to set up are something like these are the gaps that you often see, and you see the bigger business metrics not being met, and then it comes down to who's accountable for it, right? I think
Right,
it all
right.
comes down to how you ultimately communicate and bridge those gaps. And because the
Correct.
ultimate goal is what everybody wants to achieve, right? And it's not like we want something and you want something. It's just one
No.
goal.
It's
So
deal
it all
closure.
exactly,
Yeah.
we would be happy, you would be happy, and the business would be running.
Yes.
So I think that's something that we all aim
Right.
for. So there's one bonus question that I would want to ask, because there are a lot of early career PMMs as well who are listening to us. So what's one underrated signal that tells you a deal won't close, like long
Yeah.
before the sales team admits it is there anything that you have insights on?
Right, right, right. Again, coming from all the past experiences that I just now shared with you, I feel the earliest red flag, right? It's not something around your budget or not something that brings up your competition in place. It is the silence in the response. After those initial few calls, right? Imagine your champion who was very active in the discussions, very actively reaching out to you, asking you for questions and initiating things, and suddenly that there's a lull, right? And they just don't respond. So that's definitely a red flag that, I mean, we should be taking a note on. And it is wise enough to understand that a buyer who was replying so frequently to me and now is just ghosting me, there is something definitely that is shifted internally at their end, right? And we are not on the top of the priority, their end. At their end, right? So, this is definitely one. And I would say that this is one of those data signals that our team here also has been keeping a constant watch on. So what we do is, the moment the SDR, whoever is the person responsible, whether it is the SDR's responsibility or the AE's responsibility or even the pre-sales team's responsibility, imagine that you have to get back to them with something, right? Imagine the first call and the SDR has been requested to send a one pager or a high level use case, or maybe the AE has been asked to send a video or a use case sheet. Or imagine the pre sales team has been asked a particular solution deck or vertical specific deck which has been requested, and there is a delay in giving back. So imagine I'm reaching out to you asking for some help and you take a week to get back to me. Will I still have that interest of reaching out to you? No, right? So that's when after I came into the role, I have made sure that these kind of information gaps are not there. So what is being expected, be quick enough to give them. At least, even if that person is not very sure of considering you for the solution that they're looking out for, your positive approach of reaching out to them, helping them solve a problem, giving that value will always stand out. Right? So, looking out for those signals, and as a PMM, this is the bare minimum that you can do because you are not having the cadence to follow up. You're not responsible for that, right? That's not your job. You have the sales team doing it, the different layers, right? So, the bare minimum that you can do is you can help them support it. And week over week, if you have this regular call wherein the team meets up, just check what are the requests that they are sending out to you. Don't wait for that call. Usually have our teams or smaller Slack channels wherein we keep discussing each of these deals, right? So if there is a need, if there is something that is not already there in the repo, quickly create it and just share it out. That's something that helps, definitely helps.
Yeah, I think having that proactive approach towards
Mhm.
these minor pulses are really important.
True, absolutely.
So, coming back to handling some really complex products, which you're doing right
Mhm.
now, which is like customer data platforms, you have also handled some products in ad tech and martech, which are all like layered and very technical spaces to be in as a product marketer. So, what's your go to method for positioning a complex product in a way that's clear, which is more
Mhm.
human and still technically accurate?
No one is trained to do any of these product marketing. I mean, to drive any of these product marketing initiatives. I feel Shruti, because textbooks can just teach you just few pointers. They can guide you on a framework and give you a definition. But when it comes to real work, you have to learn while working with your team, right? And that's something that has happened to me as well. So as you said, the complexity is in the problem. It's actually the layered system, right? All these the industries that I'm talking about, it has the layered system, which makes it more difficult to build a messaging around it, right? So the problem is in lot of these cases, and I've seen this happening in other industries also, we confuse complexity with value. So we think that we have around 500 features, so let's talk about all those 500 features, right? It is important to understand that they're not buying your features, they're buying it for an outcome that they want to drive. What's the value that those 500 features, or it could be just one feature, is what is providing them, right? Which is making their life easier than what would have happened before your solution was there with them in the system. Right? That's as simple. But the same logic that we have taken in my current organization, in the other organizations that I was working in this particular domain, right? So I'll give you maybe a couple of examples of what we did, and then that will help you understand some of the measures that we took, right? So first, I'll take an example of the customer data platform that we were working on, and I'll tell you how we solved one of the problems. So what is like the situation was that we had a classic product problem where we felt that built something powerful. Users were very overwhelmed. We had a tons of features which looked very impressive, but we realized that the adoption was slow. Feature usage was low. Support tickets were high. Content and everything is there. Product adoption content and everything is there, but somehow still the users are feeling a bit lost, right? So here is something that I did, not alone, but with my product team and my UX team, because it was a joint effort that we had taken up. And again, this is an example wherein anyone trying to learn from a PLG motion can take some understanding of how we solved it. So what we did is we tried to understand which is that position, which is that point in our user flow wherein my users were getting stuck, right? So what we did, we started with the usual thing, user interviews, analyze the support tickets, right? But even with these data points, it was just giving us what people were struggling with. It was not helping us that along with the, I mean, what is the next, right? During these daily tasks that they were doing, we wanted to understand which is that area where they were getting stuck. How did they use the platform? Where which is that one portion, which is that one module, which is that one screen where they're hesitating? What is that particular feature in that screen which is frustrating them? And the most important one, what is it that they ignored in their entire exercise, right? We came up with some really interesting findings, and some of these were like great eye openers. We realized that our users were spending a lot more time searching than actually doing a task. So we were vouching a lot on our advanced features, which is something that they were not at all using. Instead, they were trying to look out for the easiest way to get a work done. And this is what made us feel that they are not looking for advanced feature. They're looking for something that is going to give them speed, that is going to be very easy to use, right? So this was one realization that we had in mind, and that's when, probably while the product team was already working on revamping the user experience, which is again a bigger launch that we had planned, and I was working on that. Another thing that came on my end was to define the proper messaging around it, right? So we stopped talking about what we built. We realized that we need to start talking about what users want to accomplish faster, simpler, right? Lesser number of clicks. So earlier we were using a position in something like powerful CDPs with advanced features. I'm not naming the features because those are very CDP specific features. We changed the entire narrative to getting started in minutes. So what does it mean? Getting started it means I'm not talking about those features. Now I'm telling you that those features had certain tasks that you wanted to do, right? Like build an audience, like activate a campaign. So now, because you're getting started in minutes, you can see results faster after you have made these, after you've built a audience, after you've activated a campaign, you get faster results. So this was a change. And of course, when you're talking about numbers, right? Like easy to use, less number of hours that you need to spend, right? Your adoption rate is for sure going to change. And that will give a lot of confidence into your users, telling that, okay, they are not just selling advanced features, but they're also trying to solve my problem because I was lost all this while. Right? So I really remember this exercise because it went on for this entire project went on for like almost 6 months. So this was a parallel activity, not just revamping, but also like building the narrative and then the launch around it. Like launch is always interesting, but these are like things that, again, having to work in a startup is what has given me the perks of being part of such workshops or such activities. I mean, there are a lot of these products wherein we are trying to build a narrative on the AI side of things, right? Like the AI advantage that a product gets in, right? So this is one of those examples. This was the ad tech industry, wherein almost every player is obsessed with AI. And when I talk about being obsessed with AI, they use AI in that particular industry for their power, for the precision, for the scalability, for the creativity. Optimizations are these things that they mostly use. And almost all the players in the market are using it, right? So when we did, I mean, our initial positioning was actually around AI's technical advantages, AI's technical process. But then we realized that we wanted to spend a little bit more time and see what is the exact market definition or feedback, or what others are actually using to build or talk about their AI narratives. We researched a few papers, some of the reports. We spoke to some industry experts, right? And we figured out that while the buyers loved the AI capabilities, they were also nervous about losing control. So, uh, these brands, so in the ad, it's about uh, a brand trying to run an ad that would give them more users for user acquisition or retaining them for the retention campaigns. This is as simple as that. And you have the different ad tech players helping brands do that. I'm not going into the details of programmatic, but that's more about the entire ecosystem all about. Every player in that ecosystem was using AI to enhance the output, to give you better reach, because they tell you more accurate user reach would mean better user acquisition, and higher kind of content would mean better retention. So the stickiness would continue to be there. Everyone was using it around that layer, right? But what happened is that buyers loved these AI capabilities, but they were very nervous because they felt that the brand's authenticity, right? The brand's value, the brand's tonality is going to get substituted with something that is not theirs, which meant too much of automation would kill the creativity, first point. because all these ads and all have to be creative. If you have too many AI layers on top of it, it will not look something authentic that they have been doing for years, right? They were getting signals, so they were getting this AI generated insights would mean they might lack some of the business context. If all the areas or insights that they were looking for is not meant, this would mean a very dummy data coming their way in terms of insight. So not properly learned models basically. Campaigns would mean something robotic and irrelevant, I said you, right? Because you think your data is good, but you realize it's a dummy data, is not really reaching the right audience. And you know the creative is good, but then you feel it's a bit gimmicky because it doesn't feel right to your brand, right? So they would feel the entire outcome is irrelevant. So we realized that it's not that they didn't want AI, right? Instead, they wanted AI that was working with humans. So they wanted that supervised AI element. They wanted to say that human intervention in every layer is important. So the narrative that we came up with was like it was AI plus human, not AI versus human. So the entire positioning challenge that we faced and what we came up with was how AI should work in, I mean, this entire process was instead of focusing on the technical aspects, we started balancing and looking for a more collaborative approach. So we wanted to say that AI plus human is what is giving you the results. So every layer that this brand would go through to build the final outcome, we put in that it's not just the AI there, it is also supervised by your human intervention. So whether it is defining goals for your campaigns, whether it is training the models with the past campaign data, or the outputs that you want to show, right? So every layer we wanted to put AI into, like it's not just AI versus human, but you now have a better output because you have AI with human assistance. So that kind of worked, the supervised AI element, and we did a few of our PRs and reports which really struck well with the industry experts, and it felt like it worked well. But again, I'm no longer there in the system to test if it is still working, but I'm assuming it's there working there.
Right. Yeah, I love the fact, and it kind of resonates with this April Dunford's messaging framework, right? The so what thing that you keep asking so what after every feature that you think is really good, like 50 features that you think are really good.
Yes.
So I think I have used that framework so many times, and even recently in one of the projects that I worked for messaging, I followed that, and it is exactly the kind of results that you shared. So that so what framework has really helped. And I think it just makes your job easier to talk about the features within the value first and the customer focus, goal first. So I think that really helps.
That definitely does.
Yeah. So, on a completely different note, I want to also talk about analyst relations a little bit because I know you have worked a little bit on that as well, and you have led Zeotap's inclusion into Two Forester Landscape, which is kind of like pretty cool, and which is every PMM's dream milestone as well. I was able to do that for one Gartner report, and that's it. So, how can like PMMs who are just starting out building credibility with analysts and the market without big budgets or teams? Because I think most of the people we work with are in startups, so we don't have like big budgets for these things.
Right.
But then,
Right.
do you have anything to share on that as well?
Yeah, sure. And I think I was having this discussion with another fellow PMM just last week, and we went on to discuss this for about an hour. So I'll just try to keep it very short. As you just said, but how I keep thinking about this, and I keep telling this to all my PMMs connections, is that when you're talking about analyst relationships, right, it is not just about budget. It is also about being credible source, and you cannot use that analyst briefing session as a vendor pitch. These are things that you should think of first before you even think of it, before even you aim or plan towards analyst briefing, right? So, but again, there are two parts to this entire situation. One is you have a subscription or you do not have a subscription. Again, this is something that they ask, right? So if you have a subscription, again, I'm not saying that if you have a subscription everything is going to be easy for you. No, I'm not telling that. But at least you have a framework to know how to reach out to them, right? So I have worked for Forrester, like in detail for both the mentions, and for Gartner also. I was part of the entire project. So what happens is that I'll first tell you what happens when you have a subscription. Then I'll briefly cover the when you do not have a subscription. What are the other ways of doing it? like how you could do it. So when you have a subscription, right? So it starts with building a relationship before you actually need the time with that analyst. So what happens is whenever you have this analyst, these subscriptions, right? You usually get an account manager assigned for your account, and that person plays a big role in building a relationship and finding you the right slots. What are the upcoming reports or landscapes or waves, or I mean, Forrester calls it waves and landscape, Gartner calls it report, right? So which are the upcoming ones that are coming up, and you're already having a subscription, and assuming that you also had a subscription the last year, you would definitely have contact with one of the analysts who was part of the subscription last, I mean, of the briefings last year, right? So making use of the past data. What are the past reports that that analyst was part of? Are you going to be part? Is that analyst going to be part of this year's briefing session also? These are things that will help you prep, right? Now, when it comes to the briefing sessions, see, your POC, the account manager, as I told you, is just a gateway, but that person cannot ever influence the decision or the timing or whatever context that you're going to drive during the actual briefing sessions, right? So that person is just a support for you. It is for you and your leadership to define. So this analyst, because you have done a briefing the last year, highly possible that you're still relevant, right? Now what you need to do is you need to come back and build this team who would be part of these analyst briefing sessions. Whether it's going to be, I mean, in my case, I was not really being able to give the briefs, but I was the one who was driving that entire session and building the deck. So it's very important how you define the deck, right? So again, as I said, that this deck cannot be used as a investor pitch kind of narrative. It cannot be so. Showcasing your real work as your foundation in this session makes a lot of difference. So do not just present your roadmaps. Like for us, we were on the road to release our new revamped user experience and the entire research that I told you about, right? So we showcased that as one of our specific proof points of standing out, one of our main differentiator. Another example could be like you want to, your plan of expanding to a newer vertical, the gaps that you saw in the market based on the researches and what made you shift to that. That could be one. Then some of the emerging trends in the particular industry you're talking about, that you are relevant in, and the customer use cases that you're solving for aligned to that particular user trend. So I'm just giving you some examples because you cannot just go back there and present your roadmap or use it as a elevator pitch session. That will not work. Usually you would get a 45 minutes to 1 hour slot wherein you have to break the session into such a way that you have good amount of time at the end to demo the plan. Demos stay at the top of their mind. They remember. Like for us, I remember what had happened. We had done the revamp of the user experience, and before even showing the actual demo, we showed them the exercise that we did to create the information mapping, the information architecture. So that really stood out for them because, again, as you've already mentioned in the beginning, that it's a very complex domain, a technical domain. Someone who using that entire complex user journey, mapping it to such an extent the entire user experience becomes so simple. The way our information architecture played that differentiator stood out. So they remembered us. And that was one of one of the many triggers for sure that helped them to keep us, remember us, stay relevant, and mention us. So you have to stand out for sure. That's something that's a briefing session, right? Now comes the time wherein the actual time comes in and they send you that big form or the sheet to fill up the data for the actual submission, right?
Yeah.
And as you know, for both the analysts, the questions can be very detailed. And it is not possible for just one department or just a PMM to fill it up. So that is where your stakeholder management comes into place. You have to be that collaborator to get this thing done. So I remember for the Gartner quadrant, right? We had a sheet that had more than 200 questions and it was divided across different departments. So I had to break it down, put responsibility, put a timeline for them, and set a expectation that each of the answers that they give has to have some data points to back them up, right? Same with Forrester. So that's about how you plan it, how you build a relationship, how you make use of that analyst briefing session, what to use, what to be presented in that session, and finally the submission, right? uh, comes the part wherein imagine you've got a mention. What do? If you have a subscription, then it's easier for you because no longer, I mean, because you have the subscription, they will anyway be mentioning you. They also do a couple of news and PRs with you. You could, of course, use that particular piece of content to not just promote, but to use it also as a demand gen content. The moment your subscription goes off, what happens? Your content, the mention that you got, right, that stays gated. You have the report that can be accessed internally with your sales team. Right? So that becomes a bit tricky how you can use it now. Yeah, so I mean, it worked. It does work. I've heard from a few others also in the industry that has worked. The other thing is like now imagine you had the subscription in the past, you no longer have it now. Going back to the credibility that you had built in the past, to some extent it plays a role. And these analysts calendars are mostly public, and because you've worked with them in the past, you can maintain and it's not just you maintaining the relationship, because your leadership teams have been part of these calls, right? So they will definitely be able to relate and remember. And you have to continuously probably try to build a relationship with the account manager. That helps. These things help. We know, I mean, product marketers know how to get things done, so we understand these things better for sure. The other thing is, if imagine you have not got a mention also in the past, right? In that case, what I tell people is, think first, what is your budget? If imagine you have never got an analyst briefing mention in none of the reports, you want to do it, you do not know how to start with. The first thing that I tell PMMs in that situation is, what's the budget that you have? Can you really go after this bigger analyst, or you want to start with something smaller? Even before doing that, what is the ground level work that you need to do? You need to be ready or like align with your leadership that, is my product good enough or in that state? I mean, it's not an elevator pitch. You have to show them that you have credibility, right? They will absolutely look for those customer testimonials, those review points. If it is a PLG motion, they would definitely want to see what is standing out. If you are a category leader, they would want to know that what is it that is making you a leader, right? So, are you ready with all these questions? Only then plan for it. If you are not ready, if you're still testing the waters, then start with a smaller mention. That's about it. Because once you are ready and you want to go ahead and you imagine you have already started booking the slot with them, which is very difficult to get a slot, you have to be prepared. You cannot go there unprepared. So, right. So, these are the groundwork that I ask PMMs to do before they even think of going for to invest in an analyst relationship with, if they have a budget on.
So, Tanvi, we are moving on to the last question of this episode. This is purely advice based. Like, if somebody is starting out at PMM today, what's one skill would suggest them to double down on for the next 3 years, or maybe two?
Great question. And I'm glad that you're asking me this, because this is a question that I get asked almost every 10 days in the mentoring calls that I do with my mentees, right? So I would not say one point, but I'll spend some time to answer this, right? First thing that I keep telling is, right, I have not met a single PMM who has been doing product marketing from day one. So even if you are starting fresh or you're trying to move into PMM from an entirely different role, do not hesitate. Almost every department is doing some part of product marketing in a certain way that organization needs them to do. So in that case, you should not even think and hesitate of getting started. Just think and plan better before you look out for the role, which is what I keep telling my mentees, that look out for the JDs properly, because I keep saying that as a PMM, your role might sit in the organization in different areas. You might be under the marketing org, you might be under the product org, or you might be entirely under the GTM org, wherein you work more closely with the partners, with the sales and all, right? So each of these departments will need you to drive different areas of product marketing. But when it comes to some of these common characteristics that a product marketer should have, the first thing is definitely the eye for data. Try to think analytically, try to reason, like everything that you are seeing being built or being talked about, or your sales team selling, or your product team building, or giving a reference in a customer call. Try to understand it from the customer's point of view. Try to find out what pain point they are solving. So unless you're analytical, you have an ability to reason, you will not be able to connect those dots. So that's definitely important, right? Second most thing that I keep saying, that you have to be creative. Doesn't matter if you have an AI tool to build a deck for you. At the end of the day, I mean, I was having this discussion with another PMM community wherein people were asking that which is that AI tool that we use to get our works done faster. There's no harm in taking a AI tool's help in getting your work done faster. Everything is fine. Just that it'll not feel like it is your brand's output. So unless you are creative, you will not be able to think, that, okay, what is it that is lacking that brand essence. It should look like my orgs, my products narrative, right? So you have to think, I mean, have that creative angle to it. And creative means, I mean, creative can be in different ways. It could be something related to the design part that that I mentioned to you, right? It could be the ability to think out of box. Imagine you do not have budget. You have to drive something big with a bare minimum budget, bare minimum bandwidth. What is it that you can get out which would still look catchy, which would still be punchy? So unless you're creative, you can't think of coming up with something of that sort, right? And the third thing that I say is, no matter how technical the product is that you are getting into, you have to understand the product. You have to sit with your product team or your pre-sales, whoever. Like in some cases, the pre-sales teams also understand product very well,
Hmm.
right? So you have to be close to the product. That doesn't mean that I am telling you to know everything in the user experience, everything in the user flow, everything in the user interface. Not every product is PLG driven, right? But know the product in and out to understand what is the problem that you're solving, which are the personas for whom you're trying to solve a problem, right? So analytical, strategic or creative thinking and staying closer to the product are the three main pillars that I always tell that any PMM should be strong in. And of course, I would say that, see, now in the age of AI, we definitely have to have our hands on some of the most essential tools that we use, which is something that you can figure out. Like for example, if you are in short of a designer, you can definitely spend more. I mean, if you think that you are better with design, it's always better to understand some of the design part of the tools. Some of the generic tools that we use for copy, for research, those are basics, right? And workflow driving, to define workflows, there could be some more. Coming to the GTM side of things, again, it depends to what length and breadth your product marketing roles and responsibilities would be defined in your organization. You can go ahead and find more AI driven tools in that side. But otherwise, I feel once you get into the groove of being a product marketer, all these things you can actually acquire while you're in the
On the job.
game. Actually,
Yeah.
that's how I went our situation.
Exactly. Yeah. I love that. And I hope people listening to are taking notes. Tanvi, thank you so much for breaking down what modern product marketing looks like. I know it's a lot of moving pieces here and there, but you still get to do it with some, joining some PMM communities and coming back to some PMM communities. I know you have been doing a lot of work into building something in Bangalore, India. I would love for you to share a couple of things on what you're building, and if I can add some links to it where people can follow, I would love to do that.
Yeah, sure, sure, sure. So I'll tell you what brought us into building up this community, right? So me, along with two more product marketers whom you know very well, one of whom has already been part of your podcast, which is Sachin Jha. Yeah. And we also have Kushal. So we three met in another more popular product marketing community, which is a product marketing alliances community. And similar to this, we used to do these virtual meetups and we would talk. And then one fine weekend, we realized it's not raining in Bangalore and the traffic is better. Let's catch up. So we met up for coffee. We did a couple of such meetups and we realized that, same as you and me, we were talking before this recording started. We had so many topics to talk about. There were so many common lines. And we realized that while three of us were lucky enough to have got mentors in our workplaces, same with me, Sachin and Kushal, I would say. And while we three were there for each other, not many product marketers in the market are getting that exposure to people who can talk about actual problems, right? Not going out there and building a community to prove a point. No, we just wanted to see that there is a group, there is a community wherein any random question, it could be as simple as I started with, right? Someone trying to get into PMM, someone exploring a tool to build a deck. Ask a question, no one is there to judge you. Whoever is available to give a right answer, we'll guide you on it, right? So that was the whole idea. We thought that, okay, let's put up a post on LinkedIn and ask people to meet us on a weekend in Indiranagar, Bangalore. And it so happened that at least 20 plus people ended up joining us. Yeah, and it was so good. And I think we have so far done 3 meetups in person, and every meetup the number is increasing. We are trying to do more virtual meetups as well, but I think people enjoy the in-person meetups more. So you can definitely look out for a couple of those by the end of this year, a virtual and an in-person. And I will surely share the link with you. We call it product marketing over chai, for a love for chai, three of us. So that's why we three had met. And that's about it.
I love it. And I've always been a big supporter of PMM communities everywhere. So I am also a part of that group, and it's always hustling and bustling with a lot of great conversations. So I would pursue people to go and get added in those groups because they're really good, and you should be attending either virtually or in person. So all the links will be in the description below. So do check them out.
Sure.
Yes, also for everyone listening, remember clarity beats complexity every single time. That's it for this episode of Behind the Brief. If you found it useful, share it with a fellow marketer trying to make sense of their data dashboards. Until next time, keep learning, keep iterating, and stay curious. This is Shruti signing off.